You're listening to Trending with Timmerie, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics. National speaker Timmerie Millington has been a passionate advocate for life as long as she can remember, helping Gen X through Z answer the call to true feminism and authentic manhood. Timmerie holds a master's degree in biblical theology, and she covers this week's hottest stories from a Catholic worldview. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie.
Hey everyone, Timmerie here from Trending with Timmerie. It's so wonderful to be with all of you. I have been on the road, as many of you know, throughout the month of June, and so I've been recording interviews with some of the incredible people that I have had the opportunity to meet, and one of those individuals was actually at the Vita Institute with me this summer at Notre Dame. Her name is Beverly Duane, should I say correctly, and she has an incredible story. Why her story stood out to me, and I want to share it with you as we talk about some of the current issues going on in the culture surrounding fertility and the major decline in fertility, along with the outlook that we may see priests across this nation being pressured to break the seal of the confessional. That really weighs heavily on her own story as a revert back into the faith. But something stood out in particular to me that we'll unpack a little later. She said to me one of the very first things out of your mouth, actually, Beverly, when we met, was that you wish you had more children. And this is a story of so many women today. So without further ado, Beverly is the director of dance at Hampton University and also teaches health. She's a mother of two and is married. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we have a lot in common. Before we even dive too deeply, we're sitting here kind of connecting quickly, and next thing you know, I find out you dance, I dance, we both teach Pilates, kindred spirits at heart here. Tell me a little bit before we dive in further how you got involved in dancing.
Oh, my. I actually took my first dance class in college. And actually, before that, I'm just reminded, my first dance experience was with a Catholic nun in a Newman Center. And she invited me to do liturgical dance, and I fell in love with it. And I fell so much in love with it that I was a psychology major in college. And I said, I think I'll take some dance classes to really help me. So when I'm doing the dance with the sister, I could do it better. And I enjoyed it so much. And it, really revolutionized my world. And I said, the teachers kind of liked me. They felt like I had some natural ability, even though I didn't have technique. And they encouraged me. And I ended up taking all of their classes, and then they encouraged me to go on and get a dance degree.
That's incredible. So you gained the technique, and then years later, you ended up founding your own dance company as well. Is that correct? Tell us a little bit about your dance company.
Well, I moved to Virginia, where my husband had a job in the Virginia Beach area, and there wasn't really a dance company in that area, and it would have taken me, I would have had to drive several hours, 4 hours to Washington, D.C., and that just didn't seem that feasible. So somebody had mentioned, why don't you start something? There used to be something in the area, and I founded a modern dance company and found other people interested in doing the same thing, and just more, it became kind of like a collective. Mm-hmm. I organized it, directed it, found funding for it, and made a pretty big impact, and actually started a pretty thriving modern dance community in the Hampton Roads area as a result of that little beginning.
That's incredible. There's so much history there, especially in the modern dance world. I know I shared with you, I had the opportunity to take classes and on a couple occasions perform with the Lula Washington Dance Company in my heyday of dancing. So
neat.
Just to bear with us as we geek out over dancing and maybe Pilates a little bit later, both having nice high microphones because you're awesome posture because you're spine health here. So I want to dive in. About a month ago, Beverly, there's a statistic that came out here in the United States saying that, hey, fertility for women is lower than it's ever been. In fact, we've been for consecutive years below the replacement level. Replacement level is 2.1. We're at 1.7. Make of it what you want. Times Magazine pushed out there saying, hey, it's no big deal. People are still having 2 kids. It's just people are having kids later in life. Now, this is very deceptive because women's fertility is like a ticking bomb, and at a certain point, you can't just have children at any point in your life. So I want to dive into your story. You grew up Catholic, if I understand correctly. Tell us how you left the faith and kind of where this tied into your marriage and journey of fertility.
Well, I grew up Catholic, and while I was Catholic, I did invest myself. I did enjoy it. It was meaningful, and I got to do really special things like work with this Catholic nun who encouraged me to use my faith in a thing that I loved with dance. So my husband, we didn't have children right away. And even as Catholics, I don't know if we had the catechism of the really official church that kind of promotes that we don't use birth control. So we did use birth control, and I was very career-minded. And, I invested in my college, and at that time, too, I was pursuing a master's degree then in dance because I was so serious about it and thought I might want to teach it on the university level. So I ended up, we were just experimenting with other churches at that time. There was a big movement away from the Catholic Church at that time. There were a lot of really sprouting evangelical communities and non-denominational outfits, and it seemed like there seemed to be a liveliness. And things were kind of just feeling very even in the Catholic faith for me. And I, at that time, was not actively having children. I was very involved in my career, but I still believed in God, and I felt like maybe there would be even more spiritual development pursuing the Bible and pursuing, some of the charismatic circles and these charismatic churches and these churches that, were becoming mega churches, and a lot of really faithful Catholics were going to. So
how did the Protestant worldview on contraception influence kind of already a career-oriented mindset and this choice to delay at the time parenthood, or did you not want to have children at all?
Well, like I said, as a Catholic, I didn't know that it was such a strong rule because most of our Catholic friends were using contraceptives.
Right.
So
that's what you did.
That is what everybody did. So I kind of kept thinking, yes, I definitely want children someday, right. But I was so fearful of pregnancy, especially being a dancer, and my body image was all intertwined with it. And I was a dancer, but I was always struggling with my weight. Because it was always something that was first and foremost, and it does affect dancers when they're wearing extra weight. So I was constantly dieting. Many times I would only eat one meal a day to kind of stay fit, and exercising a lot to try to fight, that battle. Right. But I just, in our marriage, thank God when I, was married, I'm very proud that I was a virgin when I did get married, and that was such a blessing. But, during that time, I thought nothing. I did not think in any way, shape, or form that there was anything, not obedient to Christ or even in the Bible, because there's nothing about contraception in the Bible.
Right, because that's what people do. That's, I think, the mindset of so many people. They don't even think about in any way whatsoever the moral impact, the moral mindset, right, whether or not it's right or wrong. And, we talk about it a lot here on Trending. For those just joining us, you're listening to Trending with Timmerie, and Beverly Duane is joining me. But a lot of people don't even think about the medical impact on women's health. And we unpack that so often here on the show, yet those are the conversations we need to have more often. So here you are, you're, I'm guessing, getting into your later 20s. You've pursued a master's degree. Right. You're working in your field of choice. It's wonderful. You left the Catholic faith. When do you end up starting to have children? What makes you decide to be open to that?
Well, we ended up moving from upstate New York to Virginia Beach, where I was running the dance company. And as I was running the dance company, I enjoyed it tremendously. It was very fulfilling. It was really a dream of mine, and we had to do so many incredible works, bringing all these guest artists, and I was teaching at the university at the time, but my husband was really the person who said, I really want children. Mm. And we ended up kind of debating it, and I was thinking, well, we can push that off,
right.
But he really did talk me into, that this is an important part of our relationship, and this is something that we should do. And I was in circles where the Protestant circles, they procreate too, and they're the really committed Protestants are amazing people that really love the Lord, and I think that their expression is to have children and enjoy family life. And so I started looking at that and kind of realizing that this career of mine is meaningful, but that I could see myself as a mom, and that would be also pretty meaningful. But I was still grappling with so many body issues, to be honest. I was so afraid of being fat as pregnant, This is pretty interesting. I really didn't think about it until you asked the question.
But it's legitimate, and I think that that's something we kind of need to validate, because the reality is when you have children, your body changes, and it changes forever. Some women's bodies recover really well, others don't. Some women are physically active, others aren't. I mean, every pregnancy is so different in the recovery. And so I understand where you're coming from a dancer's perspective as well. But I'm sure you've also seen models at that time of women who were dancers, who were getting pregnant and getting back into dancing as well. That's become more of a trend now, however, I would say.
Yeah. But a lot of the people that I knew were kind of ectomorphs who were getting back into it, so they would lose their weight right away. They loved pregnancy and all this. But, you're reminding me of something else. As a woman, I went through a lot of emotional changes with having menstrual cycles, and I was pretty actually regular with them. But it was always, the yo-yo emotions that go along with the hormonal changes during all that.
During using hormonal birth control as well.
Well, I wasn't doing that.
Okay.
Thank God. I'm very glad, and I think that helped me get pregnant pretty easily when I wanted to. Mm-hmm. But I did feel...
So just to clarify for those who are listening, I'm assuming you're using barrier-type
method.
method.
Yes, something barrier.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was... It's really weird. I had this kind of strange fear of flying in airplanes. And you're going to wonder how this relates, but it does. I had this literal, I had this feeling like I was going to die in an airplane. I know I watched too many airplane crashes that happened in the 80s or whatever on television with a full 9 yards, and you're just like in the middle of America, or these ones that go down in the ocean. I just kept seeing this on the news, and that influences you. But it was like I didn't have a whole lot of fears in life except for that. And I am a pretty controlling person, and they say that controlling people do not like to fly in airplanes because they're not flying the plane. God forbid if I ever did write one, but fly one. But in any case, when I was up in airplanes flying, I had this weird conviction, God saying, you must have children. You need to get pregnant. And I was like, but as soon as that plane would land, I was like back to my normal self. I can't get pregnant.
You'd only think that when you were up in a situation that you were already afraid of.
Yeah, because I was in a crisis. I was in a panic state, and I was thinking, what would be the most important thing that I did right now before I died? It was weird.
So it was the one thing that was on your heart kind of that you wanted to do, but also maybe in a situation where you're facing a fear of yours, you're addressing it, you're living in it, and God's going to see, you're here up in the sky, you're okay, you can also have a child. But isn't that the reality of so many young women today? They also look at the changes of their body, the changes of career, economic, all these different situations with relationships. That's how scary for some people having a baby is, because the reality is flying in an airplane thousands upon thousands of feet above the earth is actually a terrifying thought when you really think about it.
It really is. And then, I think it just gets you in reality with what really counts in life. When you're in a situation where you think you're going to die, you have to realize, hey, and it was an unrealistic fear. We know that planes are safe for the most part in that, but it was just something that as a woman, and it could have been my emotions, or it could have been, just the fact that I was, that I didn't have children.
Right.
Because, when you don't have children, you don't have anything to worry about except yourself.
Right. But you do think about having children and not having. It's a constant thought that comes up and is a reminder. There's certain things that trigger that.
Exactly.
Would you say? Yeah, that's Beverly Duane, who, for those who are just joining us, I'm Timmerie. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. So, Beverly, what was the turning point? What finally made you open? You said your husband said, okay, it's time to have children. From there, were you willing, or did it take a while?
Well, it took a little while, and I think he kind of caught me off guard. It was Christmas, and I was kind of emotional, and it's so...
Sentimental.
The first time I didn't use contraception, I got pregnant, so... I had mixed feelings. I actually did. And I was very sick. I had hyperemesis, which is a condition that women get. And I think, quite honestly, that maybe that condition was exacerbated by the fact that I had a lot of body issues.
Yeah, a lot of fear.
Yeah. So, and I just remember, my mother not liking pregnancy, even though she had 5 children. And I kind of remember her last pregnancy with my younger brother. She was quite sick. And I, of course, inherited that gene or whatever. Yeah. And so I was wretched. I just remember that was a very difficult time.
For those who aren't familiar, hyperemesis, my mom also had, I know a number of women, high rates of becoming dehydrated, among other things, constant nausea, lots of vomiting, often through all 9 months of the pregnancies, not just the first trimester. And so it's a gene that many people do have an experience, and it is tough. It makes these pregnancies very hard. And it's a legitimate frustration for many women. I think it leads to some loving or not loving the pregnancy or, the process of having a baby. Because there are some people, like you mentioned, that do love it. So let's dive into this body image mindset as you're going through pregnancy and then have your baby. How were you handling that at the time?
To be honest, it was rough, but my husband was incredibly supportive. And just loved me, unconditionally, even though I looked in the mirror and said, oh my gosh, I look like a cow. I'm never recover. You just have these crazy thoughts. And, I was, emotional from the sickness as well as, and when I did when I was able to eat, I did store it, but I had quite a bit of weight gain. I think I gained 60 pounds, which is a lot for a woman my size.
But you were also eating, as you said, in a very different way than you had been before.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I realized that I had to eat, and that was important. But I probably ate too much at that point. It was like, okay, well, I'm not dancing anyway, so, it's just kind of like you go towards...
Another
the lowest
extreme.
lowest common denominator.
But
whatever.
Isn't that interesting? We have something so built up in our mind. We have this fear, and so then we drop a certain way of living. Like you had a very healthy lifestyle in terms of exercise, but you're like, if I'm not going to exercise, I'm just going to be pregnant. Well, heck with it. Let's throw out any healthy nutrition and exercise,
Exactly.
and we'll just go down this path. And I think it's a pressure on us as women to remember the importance of the balance of our bodies. Health, exercise, food, nutrition.
Absolutely.
It's really important, especially, when we're younger, to develop good body image, but good habits so that we know, okay, my clothes aren't fitting as well. Okay, I need to be a little more healthier for a period of time to get back into right perspective.
Absolutely. But, obviously, the day my son was born, all of that was forgotten, in an instant, just like they told me it would, that everybody says, when the child is born, you'll forget everything, including a very long labor, by the way. I was a very, very fit dancer, and I remember my midwife saying, "Oh my goodness, your muscles are so tight." And I think it took me like 2 days to deliver the baby or something outrageous, but it was worth it. I don't remember any of that. All I remember is seeing this incredible human life, and that is when the reality of, took place. I had an ultrasound, but even that was not enough reality. It looks just like a little fish in a gray bowl. It didn't have, there was nothing like holding that child in my arms and realizing this is flesh and blood. This is a human being. What my body just did is an absolute miracle. And this child is an absolute miracle of God.
Wow. Would you say that in some ways it might have helped to restore your appreciation of your body and your body image?
It helped.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me a while it did take me kind of a lifetime to learn how to eat properly. Mm-hmm. I have to admit that. I'm just going to... and I actually, I'm going to promote, I later in life found an actual 12-step program for food and joined it. It's called foodaddicts.org. I highly recommend it. I think it's a fabulous way to live, and I learned how, I got mentored. It's on how to eat 3 solid meals a day, not skip meals. And it's an elimination of sugar and flour for the most part, so it's a little bit strict, but it was worth it because, I still live by those rules and feel very comfortable with a body where my clothes fit, for years upon years, not just one day, and then you're just... Right. Outgrowing them next and in different sizes depending on which fad diet you're on. So, right. And it took me a while, but I did, gain a lot through that. And so getting back to the child, though, my first son, Daniel Michael Duane, he's studying to be a oceanographer PhD at MIT right now. So I'm just... I love him so much, and ever since his birth, I just, completely fell in love with him. Never thought that I could love anybody or anything more than he. And of course, I love my husband, but I think all real wives would admit that they love their children almost like, themselves to that degree.
It's a part of you.
Yeah, it's a part of you.
And I love coming back to your husband for just a second. This is a reminder for so many women. When you have children within the context of marriage and you truly do marry a man who loves you, he is going to be supportive and helpful through some of your greatest fears, whether it's body image, fear of pregnancy, whatever it might be. If you're truly taking the time to discern that person you're marrying, then they're going to help you through some of those moments, like you said, where he was a very positive and showed that unconditional love in the midst of body image issues.
Absolutely. Now, not all men are like that, obviously, but, when I was a little girl, I did something right. And looking back, I realized it when I reverted to the faith. I said this tiny little prayer on a prayer card, praying for my spouse. And I did that daily, and there's an indulgence that goes along with it. It's just a very simple prayer to the Blessed Mother. And, I kept that for my entire life, that little prayer card. Even though I don't ever even, as a Protestant, never referred to it. But when I came back to the faith, I found it, and I said, my husband is a lot about who I've become, not who I was, and who has been so instrumental to my healing and to my just wholeness as a human being. And that's where the two really do become one.
We'll be coming right back with Beverly Duane, and we'll be talking about her reversion back into the faith and her advice to women who are having that challenge trying to decide between having a child, career, and marriage.
Timmerie will be right back. Send her a tweet at Timmerie. That's Timmerie. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie, where morality and culture meet, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics.
We're back with my guest, Beverly Duane. We are talking about her story. If you didn't catch the beginning of it, she's a revert back into the faith. But what we've really been talking about is fear of pregnancy, the idea of eating disorders, body image, and that legitimate concern of difficult pregnancies as well. And part of the reason why you delayed having children as you're pursuing your career and dancing, your love for dancing, which is a huge part of who you are. I want to get in, you've mentioned a couple of areas, and that is one of them is, at one point you said, I wish I didn't even have a career. You said, I wish I had 11, 12 children. You only end up having 2. Mm-hmm. Can you dive into telling us why you say that, especially in light of many women who are struggling with this? I want to pursue higher level education and a career.
Well, let me back up just a little bit.
Of course.
After I had my first child, I thought, this is it. I have done it. This is all I need.
Wow.
I was getting so much love from that child and giving him so much love. And it took me a long time to convince myself to have another child. Or should I say that, again, it took a long time for my husband to convince me that we should have another child.
But so you were so proud of yourself. You loved this child unconditionally, which is awesome. But then it sounds like you were kind of thinking, oh, this meets the emotional need that I had.
This is it.
So emotionally, I feel fulfilled.
I was like, and now I can go back to my career and this is all I need. So it even took me a while to get to the point where I did have another child. I'll fast forward to that. I was getting up in the ages, and that's when I was 37. Mm-hmm. And it was 8 years after Daniel, and that's when I said, yeah, maybe I better do this, because I knew the biological clock was ticking, and that's when I decided to have a second child. And again, as soon as I was pretty fertile, because as soon as that, I was able to have him. Actually, wait a minute, there was a miscarriage in between. Okay. But then right after that, and then, that miscarriage was a good awakening, which made me want to go ahead and get pregnant again. I was hoping I wouldn't get sick that time. I went to vegetarianism in that time. I was thinking it would really help. It really didn't. Although I had with the hyperemesis, okay. I did have it again. But this time I had some midwives that really helped and gave me a very incredible diet plan, including the old-fashioned eating pickles, olives, fermented food, and carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, which I didn't know, and that kind of got me through. So I was living on ramen noodles, which was great, but it really did help with and I was able to have a little bit more. It wasn't perfect, but I got through it. So with a little bit better, before. Yeah. So that helped, and then, but I didn't think I could love another child as much as I loved my first child.
Do you think you were incapable, or there was so much love for this one you couldn't share that?
I would never have these discussions with my husband, but we're already so happy. We're so, this is perfect. And then he, but I didn't realize that I would have enough room or love in me, to love another child as much as I love my first, which is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous idea, but I think that's how inculcated a feminist and a working woman I was. It was all about, me.
Yeah. You had no other perspective. The fact that you were proud of yourself and the love you had, he made you emotionally secure. And this is what I kind of want to tap at, the attitude of so many people, that the child is about fulfilling my needs, my want. I've been married just a few months, and it's always interesting to see women who panic because they haven't had a child within the first 3 months of pregnancy or of marriage. And then people who are, really trying to delay because it's about emotionally what they think they're ready for and so forth. And there's a lot lot that goes into it.
Sure.
But someone was asking me the other day, okay, are you expecting a baby yet? People are asking all the time, pro-lifers. It's funny because secular people get so offended when they hear that question asked of me. And I almost said, unfortunately, no the other day, but it's not fortunately, unfortunately. It's like, no, it's not God's timing yet. Exactly. When the time comes, it comes. And I could say, unfortunately, no, because of my desire to have a child, but it's not just about my desire, and sometimes I think our longing to be a parent, we justify, to use artificial means, third-party reproduction of IVF, yet we have to have that responsibility with sexuality be kind of more a part of the conversation.
Right. I agree. And I think getting back to your original question, why I would recommend very highly that young people, conceive sooner in marriage and also abide by the traditional teaching of the Catholic Church is because of a final crisis that I had in my life, which was basically my older child, Daniel, when he was a senior in high school, got very sick, and I was very scared because we didn't know where it was going to go, and his symptoms kind of, they were not good. His immune system was compromised, and so it really frightened my husband and I. I did have my younger one was, I believe, 5 or 6 at that time. But, then I started thinking, gee, this is like, okay, I have these children, but they might not be forever. And that, there could be a loss or something. And I started thinking about those things and realizing that this could be very serious. It ended up fine, but it was after a long time, after a 7-month kind of struggle. He did end up recovering fine. But after he left the home, I had my younger one at home. He was like in 6th grade. I think some of the effects of, and at that point, my hormones were depleted. I think I was probably, menopausal at that time. But I started getting just anxiety and a lot of kind of a crisis. My mom almost died in front of me, and a lot of things happened to kind of make me feel like I'm just miserable. There's just something that I'm just like, I don't know what it is. And my children, I love them, so that they're a big part of, and I put them first in my life, which thank you, God. Once they were there, I knew to do that instinctively. But we were jumping around from church to church, which a lot of Protestants will do, and I think that they need to admit that. There's so much diversity in Protestantism, and you're looking for the perfect church because, we want the perfect people to be around. We want the perfect pastor. We want the perfect preaching or the music or whatever it is. And so, we were doing a lot of jumping around, but through the Protestant years, there's just so much. There's not a core belief system, so a lot of things go. A lot of things fly that are really different depending on the different congregations. Right. At the time, I'm very convicted of things at the time that other Christians were doing that I also thought were fine, things like yoga.
It's a whole other conversation. We've done a show on it. You guys can check it out.
Yeah, but, just stuff like that. But at the time, I didn't realize anything was really wrong. All I knew is that I started having a lot more just overall depression. I'm sure some of this was hormonal, but a lot of it was psychological. And
what do you attribute the anxiety and depression to? Because you were talking about it a little bit yesterday.
At this point, I really know that it was the Lord taking me rock bottom so that he could pick me up again and plant me back in the faith that I was supposed to be in the first place.
It's so powerful. And I can't wait to get into that. So don't go away, because a little later on we'll be talking about your reversion back into the faith, your first time ending up in a confessional again, and what that looked like. But tell me, for those women, because
Yeah.
You are not the only one. This is the story of most women who have grown up with some form of faith, who have left the faith, are using some form of contraception, maybe not committing to marriage or maybe committing to marriage and pursuing a career and so forth. What would you say to these women?
I would say that having a child is probably the most powerful bond in the world, and there is nothing like that. I would give up anything that I've done professionally to have one more child. All the publications, all the dance, I've choreographed over 100 dances, I don't know, even more by now. Hundreds of dances. I've been influential as a, educator. I've been influential in the community. But anything that I've done does not compare to the gift of motherhood, that it is literally our lifeline. It is what we are called to. It's our purpose. And when you find that out and you humbly admit that, you get empowered again to realize who you are genuinely and authentically. And it is a matter of obedience because, if I had the catechesis, I might have realized this, but I had to kind of learn it the hard way. But when I came back to the church, I realized a lot of these truths were more apparent.
Let's come right back on that.
You can listen to more of Trending via the podcast on iTunes or the iHeartRadio app, where you can share your favorite episodes. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie.
We're back with Beverly Duane. Beverly, you were sharing with us about the anxiety and depression you experienced over the years. And for those who are just joining us, please go back, listen to the episode at radiotrending.com, because you want to hear Beverly's full story to understand how she got to where she's at, choosing a career, delaying having children, choosing not to have children for a long period of time. You referred to your anxiety, and just a few moments ago off air, you talked about your underlying anxiety ultimately had to do with your identity. And you actually said it had to do with your identity being destroyed ultimately by the lack of children that you had. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yes. I think my feminist training, and we're brainwashed, is,
Right.
and, I was born in the 60s. I mean, all our generation was brainwashed. We had to have careers. Gave me the sense that I had to put that before having children. And then I realized, upon that second child, the tremendous love that I was able again to give to another human being and receive from him was incredible. Again, it was something that nobody could ever take away. It was a bond. It was something that it's kind of like love. You can't measure it. It's immeasurable. Mm-hmm. And so I realized how much meaning these children had in my life. And
that's such a testament, because I know a lot of women have that fear. How could I love another baby the same way I love this first child? Am I capable? Am I able? But when you have a human being in front of you, so many women suddenly discover, I could have 3 children. I could have 4 children. I am able. Yet the feminist mindset puts so much of our worth based on what we contribute to society, based on our career, based on our productivity, essentially. Yet what you're saying is that your anxiety and depression, a lot of that would not be there because your underlying issue was that you had a strong call to be a mother and you wish you lived that.
Not just that. I even think the practical aspects of parenting, for one thing, they bond a marriage. I honestly do not believe my husband and I would be married if it wasn't for our children.
Wow.
I think that women and men both get bored when they don't have that commonality. I think that children are incredible vehicles for family life, for family joy, and we have so much fun in our family. We laugh, and that the kids make us laugh, and we have, there's a freedom and a joy. And with the boys, when I had my second child, I realized, I really can love 5, 7, even 10 children. I mean, with that same love that I had for the first one. Your instinct just comes into play, and you get what we do is we become vehicles for sanctifying each other in a family. Our own sanctification as Christians comes through family life.
Yeah. So much of my studies have been in marriage and family, and the church's teaching, and ultimately it arrives at this. A marriage is so powerful. It is redemptive suffering. Marriage is meant to be a total emptying of yourself to give to the other, so much so that giving, that mutual self-giving becomes a third, right? And then from there you learn to love together that other child. This is the theology, right, of family life in so many ways, that through our suffering, through our yes that is so difficult, we become transformed. And ultimately, it brought you to a tremendous amount of joy, and you came back into the Catholic faith. Can you talk about, ultimately, here you are, you arrive at the confessional. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I got to arrive at the confessional through desperation. And it was when I was, again, kind of at a lower moment. I did have the children, but, they were growing up. I didn't have babies. And I was also just kind of fearful of losing them, and just kind of fearful that, boy, something bad again could happen. But what I realized is that I was living also a life of kind of inconsistency. I was wanting to really live the Christian life fully and behave and, not sin and have kind of this ideal Christian life, but I was kind of miserable at it. There were just a lot of things that kept creeping up that I was kind of unhappy with myself. Bitterness, jealousy, things that we women do, gossip,
right.
Stuff that it's kind of
none of the ladies listening can identify with any of that.
And it's almost, it's okay. So, we justify it, and, we certainly did in our Protestant circles. And as long as we gossip about the good stuff, but it was just I don't know, kind of I knew I wasn't really ready to die. I think that was the bottom line. And I think that gave me a certain amount of anxiety. I knew that there was something missing. I can't quite pin it down, but I was in another state of having more issues with anxiety, and other things were not helping, like some traditional counseling and, some medication that I was attempting to try and this type of thing. So at a very kind of low moment, I desperately reached out to I made a phone call to a Catholic priest. And I actually tried to get some Protestant pastors to help me at that time too, but it was a little less successful. It was around, I believe, the holidays, and it wasn't quite easy to get a hold of a family man as it was a Catholic priest. And I happened, friends of ours were in town. They had visited our church because when they go around town, they look for traditional Latin masses, and this particular church had a traditional Latin mass.
So it brought you to find this priest when you were in this need of desperation.
Yeah, through a bulletin that they left at the house.
Wow.
So I'm expecting to call this priest, but not really get an answer. But in any case, I had tried some things. I was just kind of in a state of really needing some spiritual advice and help. So I called this priest up, and he actually answered the phone. I thought, whoa, that is amazing. So I told him that I was having some issues and was wondering if he might be able to help me. And he immediately offered to come over and to pray for me and pray for my healing. And so we set that up, and he came over to my house. He made a house visit, which I thought was also extraordinary. I didn't expect the guy to be in a full cassock at my front door while I was trying to dance away some of my anxiety because dance is always kind of therapeutic for me.
It is.
And I had some crazy Diana Ross music going with.
So you were literally dancing when he showed up at the front door.
I was literally.
I love it.
Yeah. And I think it was like Love Child, some crazy song that was on my iPod. But he as he's knocking at the door, I couldn't get that iPod off. I could not turn it off. It was like on this remote, but this button that would not like switch. So I come up to the door and I'm very scared, and I bring the iPod with me because I'm thinking I get, and it was quite loud. And I opened the door and I was like, Father, I'm so sorry. I've got this iPod and this music. And he looked at me and he's like, oh, he didn't know what to think. And I just said, well, thank you for coming, but I got to turn this off. Do you know how to turn this off? He said, no. So I put the iPod outside the door just to keep it quiet so that we could, I was so worried about taking up his time. But he came in and talked to me. And at that point, he shared with me that maybe I was going through some of these struggles and God pulling me possibly back towards the faith, since I was very honest with him and told him about all the journeys that I took, outside of Catholicism.
Right. And so was it that day that you ended up going to confession with him? Or?
No, he invited me to a confession, which I think was a very good thing. He also, which I really appreciated, kind of made it clear that there is a distinction between Catholicism and other Christian faiths, and felt like this was very critical towards, my complete healing. Right. Like he was didn't soften this at all. He didn't make it like, oh, don't worry, we're all the same.
Right. We have just about a minute left, so kind of tell us, put the bow on the last elements of coming back into the faith.
Well, what I would say is that the confession was critical. And at that point, I really was very honest with him, and thinking that I would not see him again. I thought, I'm going to do this out of desperation, because even after his first visit and his prayers, I didn't have a complete peace. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted whatever this peace that I was searching for, and I did go for the confession like a month later, and he gave me a very good examination of consciousness, where you really study what the sins are. So there were many that I was actively doing that I had no idea. One was using birth control again. Right. And at that point, in the confessional, at the end, when he absolved me and started praying these Latin prayers, I just felt a complete freedom and a complete peace, an overwhelming peace, and just felt like a ton of bricks had fallen off my back.
Wow, Beverly, your story is so powerful. And for those you won't hear, she went to talk about how so much of her anxiety and depression was able to be workable, and joy came back into your life. And you are at the church every single day. You are an incredible advocate for these issues. And for those who are interested in getting in contact with you, you're actually willing to share your email address, which I'll put up under your profile page at radiotrending.com. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for the time.
This has been Trending with Timmerie. To book her to speak or learn more about her guests, visit radiotrending.com. You can listen to more of Trending via the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or the iHeartRadio app, where you can share your favorite episodes.